the process, the rather complicated process by which individual projects add up to a livable overall community. Today's guest is an expert at this, has been described in one article as a Zen master of the planning arts of persuasion, arm twisting, negotiation, etc. His background, he is from China originally, received an undergraduate engineering degree in Taiwan, received a master's planning degree, or master's engineering degree in Minnesota, and a master's planning degree, Master of Regional Planning at the University of North Carolina. He has served as planner in 3 major capacities. He was the chief planner and environmental designer for the city of Minneapolis from 1959 to 1971. He was the director of urban design in Dallas from 1971 till 78. He currently serves as the director of the Lowertown Redevelopment Corporation in St. Paul, which is a very interesting example of a quasi-public, well, I don't know exactly how you'd characterize it, but an entity that fits in between the public and the private developers in the community building process. He has also been appointed recently as a consultant to the city of Beijing. He's received awards by chapters of both the American Planning Association and the American Institute of Architects. It's really a pleasure to welcome to the college Weiming Lu, the director of the Lowertown Redevelopment Authority.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. When you come to an academic campus, I saw when you put a professor put something over your neck, I thought I was going to get a degree of some kind. All I got was a mic. No, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I had the pleasure of meeting some distinguished faculty and some students, and participate a little bit of your tea time with space musics and a few other things. Come with it. It's quite a campus. I hope, can you hear me better now? No? All right, I speak so soft, so maybe let me try to do it a little better until you can hear me. How is that? Is that okay? All right? Still louder? Or can you hear me all right? Okay. As Professor Parker mentioned, my own background is basically in planning and engineering, but by accident I get into many things that, and actually by accident I was. Is it turned on, or is it maybe? Oh, is it? Maybe I should get it even higher. I hope it. Can you? Is that better? All right. Thank you. Thank you for fixing it up. And it's nothing more disturbing than that you can't hear what the speaker was saying. I was born in China, and I grew up in an architect's family. And as a matter of fact, my father thought the best way to learn architecture was to go through engineering. And oh, how come I lose? Something must be. So, but I did get my engineering degree, but never got my architecture degree. Can you hear me? All right? I don't know, this thing is, this would be, maybe the way to, has to be at a certain angle. All right. However, through my own interests, still, nevertheless, even though after planning and engineering degree, my interests continue to gravitate toward design. And can you hear? All right? All right, thank you. If you have, now it's changed. If you have problems, then I will, you tell me. But my interest has always been in design, and whether during the 60s when there was the planning movement was going through social kind of a consciousness and turmoils and so forth, my interest remained in design, but I'm interested in bringing social dimension. Now I'm in the, whether I was in Minneapolis or in Dallas, that in planning departments, or I always been interested in whether in downtown or neighborhood. And when you get to Dallas, get into more environment and historic preservation, and that design is always my central interest. And since returning to Twin City, my work is now, the way to characterize my work is in a certain way is running a development bank. I really am not a financing person, but I need to know enough financing so that I can work with many people. So my corporation, which I will describe to you, is the way that we try to put development together. But because my interests, my concern is, and I'm trying to run this development corporation with a design conscience, you might say. Now there's been so much being talked about today that people discuss public-private partnerships. It seems such a beautiful word, but under such beautiful words, it's been all kinds of sin could be committed, I would say. There's a way to raid the public treasure. There's a way to ruin landmarks. There's a way to do something like the old day when renewal was so popular. Perhaps someday people will write about public-private partnership, what's wrong with it. I am in the middle of one of those, and sometimes been described in glowing terms. What a wonderful thing that we've done. We've done some good things, but we also may not have done as good as we could have, perhaps, and I'm sure as we review these, you will have your opinion. But what is more important, seems to me, to talk to you is to tell you in this campus, to describe to you my first-hand experience as how that one run into it. Should you become one such, in my position, how would you go about it someday? Should you be taking the kind of roles that I'll be playing? And so what I want to describe to you is these corporations, which have been 8 years in operation, and what are its functions, how it works, how do we accomplish the so-called public-private partnerships, and where we succeed, where we may not have succeeded that well, what are its primary functions and how we do carry it out, and then to describe to you some of the approach that we use in influencing design. And even though we are not a public agency, we are a private corporation, and even though we have very limited resources when you consider the task at hand. So with that introduction, let me begin with my slides. St. Paul and Minneapolis form the two central cities. For a metropolitan area is about 2 million population. So the city of St. Paul it's a rather moderate-sized city. It's about 270,000 people. In the heart of the city, the downtown. And Lowertown, named after Lower Landing on the Mississippi River, it's really where St. Paul began. This area that we've been involved is essentially consists of 1/3 of downtown St. Paul, eastern 1/3, and some very fine warehouses, some vacant land, some riverfront, but it was laying idle for many years, for many decades, in fact. And when our mayor was, current mayor was first elected in '78, he went to the McKnight Foundation, seek their help to see what could be done for this area, and knowing there's very limited resources that can be drawn from federal government. And McKnight, William T. McKnight, was one of the founders of 3M company based in St. Paul. And they were very interested in helping St. Paul. So the result of that was a $10 million set aside for this area. And this area, which you can see, consists of the eastern 1/3 of downtown St. Paul, about 180 acres area. And not only the warehouse in the center, but you can see a lot of vacant land and or parking spaces, as is shown in here and here. The foundation's primary objective at the beginning was to, just like, and so is our mayor's, was trying to create jobs and add housing, and that certainly is a important objectives. And the creation of an independent corporation headed by an independent board of directors, which consists of the chief executive officer, president of 3 major banks in town, the mayor himself, and a labor leader, a community activist, and so forth. It's truly a blue ribbon board, and I serve as executive director. And the corporation has very, as we see them, 3 major functions. One is a urban development bank. By that, we use the majority of the monies set aside by the McKnight Foundation for filling the gaps in financing. When you have a $10 million project, and you may have $2 million, say, whatever, say $7 million already raised, and you have $2 million down payment, your own equity, it may short of $1 million, then you come to us, and we try to fill the gap as such. We could take different positions as a guarantee or a loan or whatever position that might be needed. The second function, as we see it, is not just to finance project, is to see the quality of the project. So a design center, an idea exchange, if you will, that we initiate certain idea, design idea, or we react to others. And so these are our function. And the third function is as serving as an information and marketing office, if you will, to get people pay attention to this area, to change the investor psychology, if you will. And the 3 functions as a bank, design center, and marketing office. As we were get into the project, and we soon felt the compelling need to do something about the overall plan, so that we are not there just to financing project. So we start working on divided the whole 180 acres into 4 areas. In the heart of it is the warehouse. Here we are interested in basically infill and rehabilitations and mixed uses of various kinds. It is shown on the right. Could be housing, could be like that. Could turn, basically we're interested in converting space like this to that, say like offices, or small businesses like these, the Control Data Business Center, or housing, that types of uses, and take advantage of the existing resources is what we're interested in, not to change the character of the area too much. The second area is the area immediate north of that, where a lot of parking located. Here we're interested in perhaps for some new, creating a new housing village. And how do you develop some amenity and some density to totally change the image of the area. And in Minnesota, we have long winter. We're interested in perhaps vacate certain street, turn into a winter garden, and some moderate height but high density kinds of housing could be located here. And we see the potential of a couple of thousand units housing in this area, and plus some other uses that mix with it when it's done appropriately. And also on the Mississippi riverfront, and where railroad yards and other located could be relocated. And then we reclaim the riverfront for the city and for parks, for housing, for other purposes. And that's, we think, has great potential, a kind of a river garden plan, if you will. For the areas east of there, vast railroad acreage, we think could take clue from some of the existing industry is already here, that perhaps we could develop this into an industrial park of light industry and bring in some of the water features to the park. So each area, whether it's mixed use, housing, parks, industry, that we see a great potential for this area. But we have not tried to, we published a report about 100 pages or so, but we haven't tried to do a very detailed kind of plan. But the basic concept is a urban village, if you will. If the way of a mixed community if you look in terms of land uses, as I already described, would be mixed uses in the heart, housing on the north, and then the parks and so forth around the river, and the industry to the southeast and to over the railroad yards. And in terms of total image of an urban village concept, then it's something like this. We put it in this fashion, written into report, made into a very large model, and so help us to project such an image in the community. And that has been proven to be very useful. And our investor, developer, continue to come to our office to consult with this. But this does not mean very fixed and could be changed subject to market demand. So we feel comfortable, could be, certainly could be changed. Now, let me describe one of the three functions in some detail. Let me begin with the design function. As you know, in a large urban development like Lowertown, there are many actors. Certainly the building owner, the developers, the city. The Port Authority is a special entity in St. Paul, which has a financing capacity, and then the Lowertown Redevelopment Corporations. Now, we have the public, which being the city or the Lowertown, has various objectives, certainly creating jobs, housing, broaden tax base, and preserve landmark, enhance art, or reclaim the riverfront. But the private objective for the developers, which is certainly to be recognized in terms of profit making, or maybe the recognition within the community, or social good, or in other things. But these objectives may or may not sort of come together. In fact, a lot of time in conflict. So our role is how to reconcile that, and that's now we as a corporation, a private corporation, owns no property, although we could acquire land if we choose to. We regulate no land because we are not a zoning body or anything. So we have, when you consider the task, we have rather limited resources, even though the McKnight's been very generous with us. Yet we want to influence development, design, and we also hope to change the market demand. So how do we achieve that? I think that one of the most important ways that we try to influence is through persuasion. Let me give you a few examples. When we first was set up and we ran into this problem, control data came in and want to redo this warehouse, which is very fine warehouse, to make it into a business center. The idea is very good, but however, they want to change the facade, and by introducing these arches and also put mirror glass over a certain area and as a passive solar, and you can see that can easily destroy this architecture fabrics. So we went in and talked to them, told them that would really destroy the building. We told them that there are a lot of preservationists there may object. We told them that we showed them, brought the vice president to the site and showed them, in fact, this solar cell, passive solar, really is in the shadows of the adjoining buildings at so much of the time. And we try to rationalize with them, saying that you can remodel this, but you don't need to do all these things. We calculate you could save them $460,000. We said, if you don't do that, why don't you use the money to redo your garage facade, make it more compatible with the historic building? Well, I don't know what persuaded them, whether the weather or the preservationists or the money. They took half of our advice. They saved them $460,000 not to do this, but they didn't put it on the garage. But in our case, anyway, the most important thing is to save the landmark. So that's one example. Another example that we persuaded the developer when they come in to redo this building, instead of doing another one of these artificial court, have them create a new atriums, in fact 3 of them, and then renovate office upstairs, and restaurants, and keep the theaters. And all of this was done with more amenities, yet still retain the building something like 70% efficiency. With that, the space is now pretty much 100% rented, and so the building is now economically viable. Another case that we do have long winters, I mentioned, we have to get ready, and one of the energy saving thing is the district heating device. We create a non-profit entity, but the key things have to persuade our developer to join the system, and we help the city to do that. With that, the district heating has come into our district, and as a result, each building cut their energy consumption to half. Still another case that when we discovered that we want to put in historic lightings, and in the district we did some research and what was the earlier lighting like, and then brought in and persuaded the owners in the area to join that and to help paying for this. But then we run into the shelter program, the bus shelter, and the standard design, we were not happy with it, so we add the top to it, so the arch relate to the arch in this area, adding some of the fabric which came from some of the old deco in their district. when we show this to the Transit Commission, they say, well, this is not typical bus shelter design, and we cannot maintain it. So we're going to run into problems. And we went back and we talked to the city, we talked to them. We got city to come along to do this, to the top part of it. So we went back to Transit Commission saying that, look, the lower part is very much of a standard design, which could be shown, in fact, very much what they normally do in the upper part. We now got city to do it. Wouldn't you maintain the lower part? And they agreed to that. And with that, we were able to build this. But as it turned out, the most expensive part to maintain is the lower part anyway. In that particular design, we hired a consultant at our expense to help the city to design the lights, and shelters, benches, and so forth. Now, not all the cases that could be done through persuasion. Persuasion is important to us. In some cases, we have to do it by mandatory requirement. That is, have to required. For example, in a multi-use center, we want certain kinds of atrium being created in the center for public use. We want certain facade be kept. And we couldn't do it through regular zoning or other device. So what we did was, because we are a development bank, we loan money to the developer, and we managed to get it written in our loan agreement with the developer. And with that, we were able to then review it with the two-party contract. So we now have that kind of amenity, which I will show you later. Some other cases, we do it through a third-party intervention, since we don't have the power. For example, the Embassy Suite hotel chain was coming in, trying to do a development in our area, which they have some earlier time. They have very much like kind of Pseudo-Spanish design, which would not be, in our judgment, would not be compatible to Lowertown. So we talked to the mayor, got the mayor to invite us in there to participate in the process. Although some people got very unhappy, we were able to show different design, the massing of it, and in some part lower part, in some part higher, and also how it relate to the future of winter garden, future housing, and the materials, and all these, and certain view be retained by doing these studies, as well as build these model, help to illustrate our concepts, but not doing any detailed design. And we were able to get them not to do this kind of design, which they have been doing all over the country, to relate to something like this by moving their hotel to one side so that the eastern half can be safe for future use, by moving the restaurant to the front. The basic floor plan still is intact, but the outside been enhanced a little bit to relate to the area. Although some people may question the way the final result. Some people say this is almost like a new warehouse after it's done. Another case that we, through mediation, that there is the conflict between the city and developer about certain skyway, how it should be designed. St. Paul has certain standard design, which I'll show later, with Werner Truss, and the steel truss quite a bit steel. The truss is very not so transparent. I like this design, and the developer wanted to change that standard, abandon the standard together. So the city and developer ran into a big fight, and we tried to mediate the fight to find certain solution which we accepted to both. What we did was we I went to the city council to try to show them we should not change have skyway in every block very different, like the way in some city, when you add them all up, it becomes very cluttered. We think that St. Paul has a certain system which should be kept, and basically this kind of trust. But in this case, to accommodate the developer's need, perhaps could be open up the top part with some skylight or some changes. But need to have a standard, and we went to quite a bit fight with community group helping, and finally, even though inspired developers is always so powerful, we're able to have this kind of compromise prevail. In some other cases, like the farmers market, its relocation, it was very controversial. We have to go to the city council to get it changed. When we tried to relocate this market, the farmer didn't want to leave the site, so they went to the Landmark Commission and want to declare this as historic landmark, and they almost succeeded. We went there to speak against that kind of designation, and then finally was able to prevail also the city council to find a new site. And so a new farmers market was built, and so the old site can be vacated for that hotel construction, which I shown you earlier. Since moved to the new site, the market has been doing rather well. So sometimes you have to rely on city council decision to make it work. Some other cases that we have, we do it by working with the mayor and with other planning departments to come, if there's a difference of opinion as to how many units need to be built in one project, and then we resolve it in the mayor's office before we talk to the developer. So that by mayor's arbitration, then these things are decided. Some other cases, which city owns some land here, we were asked by the city to help them to set up some guideline to how this particular site should be developed, which is rather crucial, very close to the riverfront, and yet has certain constraint because of tall building here, and this is southern exposure. So we did some study, various alternatives, and then we came out with some conceptual things of different uses. Could be hotel, could be office, could be housing, and how it could be mixed, or some depends on how to take advantage of southern exposure, and made into model to illustrate these guidelines. And then when we are now currently working with the KTCA, a channel, a public television station, and basically this kind of massing is followed, and with some space left for future tower on the back, like here. So these things are done and has been followed as we move ahead. But no matter how many guidelines, how many requirements, how much persuasion, I think the key is to the competence of architects who finally will come and do the jobs, I think is absolutely most important. And how do we get the best qualified architect to the job? In the case of the hotel, we were able to get one of the best architects in town to be our advisor architect. After considerable discussion, dialogue with the developer hired our architect as his architect, so made our job much easier. In another case, the developer was going to redo this depot, and knowing our interest in design, they asked us to participate in the architect selection process. So we help to generate the kinds of criteria, the list, and sit down with them after narrow it down, and we from a long list to shorter list, an interview, and finally get an architect to do the jobs, and he did an excellent job. So that shows you that there are various approaches that we use. And you can also show that we certainly don't try to dictate design, but there are a variety of design, whether that neoclassic or whether postmodern, that all could have a place in here. But the key thing is how they are compatible in a general sense at a community level in terms of massing and scale. So there are various approaches that we use, whether persuasion or mandatory requirements or certain intervention by the mayor or mediation or city council decisions and arbitration by the mayors or guideline in advance or selection, like this cartoons. So it depends on how it is. Certainly not all the cases have to use mandatory requirement and zoning to do it. So like this cartoon said, really, Chan, why don't you just take some aspirin? Well, so much for how we influence the design. To give you a few examples of this. Now let me give you a quick glance about the way we finance project, a packaging project. And as a development bank, we are not a major financier. So we basically do several things. We help share some of the startup costs, whether it's architecture, engineering, market study, or financing study. We make loans and guarantee to projects. We can take different positions, whether debt positions, equity positions. We can help seek public funding, and we also provide, in certain case, limited direct grant to community organization, say a festival or whatever. So these are our role that we do. Now, I'll give you a few examples of our project, for example, that we financed. This is a empty furniture warehouse on top. We convert that by providing with city, each of us putting about $120,000. We're able to put together Section 8 project for 60 unit senior citizen housing, and that runs about $3 million. And this financing, because it was such a tight schedule, we had to respond quickly, and I got my board together after we got the request from the city in 2 days and get to the foundation and get it back, and we approved the loan in 6 days. We're able to then secure the kinds of loan that needed, the commitment from the state and the city and so forth. Now this project has a waiting list. In this case, a project which is about $5 million, need about $1.2 million guarantee for 5 years. We put together that financing for that developer and was able to then allow this renovation of the defined building and restaurants. And in this case, the case on the left here, we put in $2 million to get a $36 million project going, a mixed-use project, and for retail, for office, and some housing on top. That was done, but however, the project has since grown to something like 120-some million, which I will describe that later. In the case of the Y, we know that they were looking for a new site. We went after them and provided them a guarantee for should there be any shortfall in their fundraising. And with that, we were able to get them here. But then their campaign ran rather well. We didn't even have to use that guarantee. In the case of the condominium project next to the farmers market, we're interested in the moderate units, and we provided about $300,000 to get a $5.5 million project going, and provide those that for people who have moderate income can come in and buy these units, pay something in monthly payments instead of $900, they pay $500, then they can buy an $80,000 unit. what we do, we charge them no interest. But when they are selling it, then we would charge the part of the sharing of the increase of the value. This is another way of helping financing. And we also help financing a depot and other projects when it needed. And one of the most complex financing was an artist housing, which we helped to put together with the city, with the foundation, some grants, and the historic credit we used was able to put together a 30 units housing and have about 60 artists living there. And the next slide is for single adults working downtown and need very cheap sort of single room. And we have been able to, with the city and the foundation, been able to work together, put together something like a project which charged very low rent, but very clean rooms and kitchens and bathing facilities and so forth. That, again, has proven to be very useful. So in the variety project we're involved, that you can see that out of this, in 7 or 8 projects, we are directly involved in financing. And here are some of the loans that we provided, total about 5 million and about 3 million for guarantee. And then the project values, and our portion of it is about $85 million. The total project is $184 million. So if you add them all up, this is a substantial leveraging when you consider 7.4. Not all our 7.4 were used up. Actually, only $5 million were used up. So there's a tremendous leveraging effect for our money, which pleases our foundation. And the various, to sum it up, this aspect, what we have done then, we have a funding policy. We help only those projects which is needed, which has appropriate design in our mind, relate to the area. We have different emphasis. Earlier we emphasized retail, now we emphasize housing. We favor smaller and medium-sized project, rather necessarily always large project. We provide loans, guarantees, and front-end expenses I mentioned. But at or below market rate, we do this for shorter terms, say less than 10 years. We seek maximum leverage, and actually our leveraging being contrast to national for UDAG, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, we something like 1 to 30 or 40. We share, if we can, in the project upside as in one of the condominium project, and all the out-of-pocket expenses be paid back. So there, so much for the design, so much for the financing. Now let me describe the marketing effort. The marketing effort is how do you market some empty warehouse, even though they may be architecture jewel, but for the developer, for the investor who have many other places to invest, and they do not necessarily want to come here. So we do many things, and as I said, in part by reducing the risk of the developer by help financing it, by declaring the areas, defined areas, by building models, by advertising in some cases from time to time, by joining with the developer, marketing the area, or by publishing, we always publishing a newsletter, 1 page or so, sent to key investment community people, and in some other cases get our material written by somebody else published in their newsletter. There are many, many ways that we do by sponsoring art festivals that bring a lot of people to the area, certain activities. In some other cases, we developed joint hand with downtown council to have the shuttle, double-deck shuttle run between our district and a new music hall. But that turned out to be not so successful because our weather and the double-decker just doesn't work very well in Minnesota. So we lost money on that. The other things that by simply going out to speak, to make people more aware of this, and we could publicize locally, nationally, which help us to attract people from our local or afar. And by when we won the Presidential Design Award last year, we make sure the credit given to everyone. We managed to get the largest number of people receiving award from that single award, and 4 architects went with us, officials, and so forth. The White House keep telling us why you need that many people. We tell them they're all very important. So that award helped us to make people aware that we are serious about design. And these gradually, the newspaper begin to pick up and get so much better publicity for us. Now we are one of the hottest areas in the Twin City for investment. In other cases, we do these to say, a leasing office to market spaces. And so that we demonstrate and how it could be done. In this case, is senior citizen housing, the kind of. But then there are other cases we get very negative publicity, and certain projects, they keep growing, and city and other put in so much more money, it become known as a subsidized cities, and which is not really very positive. In one case, our restaurant isn't doing very well, so we do have negative publicity. But however, the positive seems to outnumber the negative stories. So we, as a whole, as being able to invest, to attract investor from local as well, from national concern, and such as a number of art galleries open in the area. A Chicago investor come in and redo one of the largest buildings in St. Paul, restore this great hall. A Philadelphia developer come in and bought one building, liked it, and bought another one, and then bought the third building, and now is making $50 million investment. An Atlanta developer is doing something with us now, and this decision will be made tomorrow whether they will be coming in. So there are a variety of things that finally began to turn around the area. I still could recall very vividly, only about maybe 4 years ago, when I was desperate trying to get someone to do that mixed-use project. I went to Texas to see some of my old friends to see whether they would come. And one evening, I remember very vividly, they were coming in by their Learjet and so forth, staying in one of these local hotels 3 blocks away, and I was concerned whether they could get to our place all right, so I waited at the street corner there for them. And here was these Texans coming this way. But the development hasn't occurred. The street was so dark, and hardly any car was there. And I was trying to persuade these people that this is what a great area to invest. And of course I failed. But however, last month when I was talking to the Atlanta developer, they came in the morning at 10 o'clock, and by noon they were pleased with it. They made a decision, a commit to buy 2 buildings. So the atmosphere perhaps has changed. Now let me finishing up by telling you one project, and then how one convert this particular block, which has 3 parking lots, 4 nondescript buildings, and 1 landmark, and into a $140 million project. And the project, I worked on it the first day I arrived. I returned to St. Paul, and we're still working on it. It is a long story, but however, I can just give you some highlight of it to give you a sense of how what are some of the problems that you run into. I guess just like any other cities, that these days you have to have a Quincy market, as shown this cartoon. Do you have a Chinatown? Do you have a Quincy market, they will ask you. So we have to build a Quincy market of our own. But the question is what are some of the issues? I think from our sense, we do need certain amenity, not a Quincy market as such. But in order to do this, the economics is very complex. What kind of mix of uses, how large it should be, and how could it have area-wide impact? What are the financial feasibilities? So we began to do studies like the one shown on the left, and hire a national consultant to work with us. We think the amenity is important. How do you create interior public space which could be used 6 months of a year? We want the exercise facility and so forth. So we went to why, which we thought was very important as we look at our market study show, to have these facilities. We want access to the arts. We want pedestrian access, so we don't want a fortress city. All these are part of our, and then preservation. One landmark need to be preserved. Certain facade perhaps could be preserved. How do you retain the area identity? So in terms of the architecture image, how do you build a massing that is not overwhelming, yet project individual identity of the project, yet it is compatible to the area? These things require a very balanced view and a very careful balance of the two considerations. And then as well as the view protection, how to be maximized. So there are many things that were done. There were many economic studies were made about the area, about the downtown, about Lowertown. As a result, after major studies, we defined the kinds of program that we think that we could be comfortable with. So much commercial office, condominium apartments, wide parking, so forth. And then the complexity of how to get our developer, which I described a little bit to you, from our effort to get a Texas developer, which we failed, and then finally got some other developers. And then the complexity of putting the financing together. Just about every known types of creative financing, we have it in there in order to put this project together and to get people to come and do it. And so that once the financing was together, we have the developer on hand, then we were able to create a kind of a mixed uses with retail, mall, the center, various access coming into this area. And we have the condominiums going up here, and also new Y here, condominium here, and some more housing. So you can see it's a very, just to show you so we were able to get the kinds of amenity we want in there, a number of large space. We were able to get a grant from NEA to try to get to be matched by developer to create 2 large pieces of environmental arts. And while we were able to get that grant and able to get the artist commitment, unfortunately we never been able to get the developer to go along with this because of the taste difference. So we now have to ship these 2 artwork from here to another locations. I think that's where we were going to do. But the amenities here now with swimming pool, gymnasiums, exercise, and all these, with restaurants, with new cinemas for the first time again, a return to downtown, and all these added so much to the life of downtown St. Paul. And one of the facade in there we thought was very important, need to be kept instead of being destroyed. And so we work on that and see that what's already lost more than half of the facade. So we mandatory that these facades be kept, and the bricks were, the facade, the were taken down brick by brick and then put it back. And the new and old, we worked on many schemes, tried to make it more compatible, to observe certain same cornice line around the park and the certain rhythm between the width and height, and to narrow the glass area from 120 feet to 90 feet is shown there. And there are many things that, but there are still some areas that we are not totally satisfied, such as this area is so big, and then some of these lines perhaps should be drawn. We work with the state historic people, the city, and it's a very complex public-private thing, so we don't have all our way. And but we succeeded in certain aspects and failed in others. In terms of the architectural image, as the density grown, that one of the earlier scheme was to go up all the way to 40 or 50 story to create, and then terrace down, almost like want to build our own AT&T. And we said, why not 2 towers instead of 1? So they came out with sort of grandfather clock and baby clock scheme, which is still very dense and overwhelming. We think, why not 2 towers diagonally opposed to each other? And so the scheme came out something like that, and then they start wanting building bridges and very wide. So we worked with them, eliminate a bridge, narrow the opening in the front, and push the tower to the back a little bit so it doesn't read as one mass, and all these things. We had wanted to, the roof form was more barrier kind of form for the glass, but we didn't get that because it might relate to the area better. So we developed sketches like these, 10 different sketches, to show there's so many different ways to respect the area, and yet you can create your postmodern design or whatever. And you can see the result. Some succeed, some success, some failure. And I think that the facade cornice line is observed now, the rhythm is okay, deliberate change of bricks and so forth, the massing, although this angle make this tower looks big, but it isn't as big as that. But there are some of these could have been, I wish these chimney wasn't there. But with the given volume, we did succeed in reducing the massing of it. And there are many entrances to the project, so no longer a fortress kind of effect, no such danger. So we succeeded and failed. So what does it all mean, finishing it up? It's a very complex public-private partnership involved not only the Lowertown Corporation, the city, its various agencies, Port Authority, business, labor, the arts, the foundations, the Chamber of Commerce, together. And there's so many boundaries, there's so many territorial interests. It's a very difficult job to try to bring them together. It isn't something like this, as ideally maybe impoverished, but more often like this, that what you have to cross boundary to get something done, that you have to get leadership, you have to have finance, show strengths to mean something, and you have to have some technical know-how to bring in some of the best expertise, whether in design, finance, marketing, in order to bring something together. We've been fairly lucky. In the past 8 years, we created 35 projects, and in contrast with the earlier, in the same areas, about $22 million for 10 years or so. Since that we started, we created $375 million project in 8 years, which means that many construction jobs. And in terms of tax base, it means it's quadrupled. In terms of permanent employment, it means 4,300 new jobs. And all these means a great deal to the city, to our foundation, to ourselves. That indeed a critical mass has been built we have 14 units, 100 units, 1,400 units of housing, shopping centers, hotels, a variety of housings from very poor to very expensive condominiums. Art's been enhanced. We now have a chance to do the riverfront. As I mentioned, every dollar that we invest in this area, we've been able to attract 30, 48 other dollars. So it's a great, so the lights, I think, indeed are coming on again in Lowertown, but still much still remains to be done that to enhance the neighborhood. We see that with what has been accomplished, now it's much easier to go to the riverfront now and to create this kind of housing village and industries and others. We barely touched perhaps only 1/3 of the total, and we think that this kind of investment is worthy of further pursuing. So this is the story of Lowertown, St. Paul. And there are many other stories, obviously, in other cities in different forms.
I think I have a question about how portable the technique is. This question always comes up. Is it a unique set of circumstances in St. Paul that puts this together, or is this something that Muncie, Indiana could do?
I think that it's always difficult to transfer these experiences, but there are certain things that I believe is crucial to any communities trying to do something relate to a major project like this. I think leadership is very important. The political leadership, the mayors, and this, we happen to have a very strong mayor in the last 10 years, been very helpful. I think the generosity of the foundation is important, but not necessarily have to have 10 million. For when Richmond, Virginia came to visit with us, they put together $2 million, and it's moving ahead with the Renaissance Corporation. I was in Tennessee and talking to Chattanooga, and they are putting together a $20 million development corporation, very much pattern after ours, and going ahead with it. And they have a much larger, more ambitious scheme than what we're trying to do the whole riverfront. I think resources is important, leadership is important. I think certain kind of interdisciplinary capacity is important somewhere, it's important. Without that, you can't bring these parties together. And I think you have to have even an underutilized area. All of those together, perhaps, is crucial.
I'm just wondering, what was the makeup of the staff of the development and the operation?
Thank you for asking me that, because I haven't, I almost overlooked that. My staff, the way we are budgeted is about $350,000 a year for 4 persons. And in the last 3 years or so, I have discovered the best way of handling it is not necessarily have 4 persons, because so much of our specialty, so much of our things that we do require very high skill. If you go to design, you've got to get the best designer who are in that area. Or if you go to finance, you've got to get the best financing mind instead of trying to hire a financing who are pretty good, but not good enough. So I end up with relying more on consultant, actually reduce my staff. I have 2.5 staff, but all my works are done when needed by consultant. I have a regular contingent of consultant when I need it. I found this is a very good way of doing it, and when I don't need any, if those things could be done by others, I always let somebody else do it. We don't do it. Only when we need it, then we get into it. So. How university involved? Yes, university has been involved with us. I have been serving as an adjunct professor for the School of Architecture and there, and I've been enjoying it. And from the very beginning and we have provided, becomes a laboratory for the school and for the students to come over, use projects. We have people use our project for thesis, not just University of Minnesota. For example, Washington University send the students and use it for thesis. And we have, and the university helped us too. And I did not show you the big model. The model was made in a design studio. It was very helpful at the very beginning, even though it's just been changed beyond recognition now. At the beginning, it was very important to get that first impression. And the student get tremendous exposure to when we go through that project. We bring the mayors and other people to the school. And so there was regular things, exchange and seeing what's going on. And we could bring in some of the top consultants too, and bring in and have that kind of exchange. So, well, I'd be happy to be around if there's any other question. Thank you very much.